Chapter 11. That evening, after Gerda left, I leaned on my balcony's railing, staring at the gardens below and the lake in the distance. It was too far to make out Curdy's, Garrick's, and Odette's forms. I could barely see bits of the shore between the weeping willows. Korth hadn't shown any sign of believing his grandmother's accusations about my untrustworthiness, and Odette was being kept in line. Even if she did say something, I felt sure that I'd done enough to call into question her credibility that she wouldn't be believed. But a drop of doubt lingered. There were too many variables. If the real King Raquel sent a missive before Father sent the falsified one, or if an additional ship was sent, or if Odette did manage to give Curdy the slip and her story was believed, there was too much uncertainty, and I hated the waiting game. Shouts of laughter came up from the courtyard directly below my balcony, and my gaze was drawn down. Korth was chasing Tess around the fountain, periodically splashing her with water so that she shrieked and tried to dodge the droplets. Tess had hiked her skirts up above her knees and was sprinting back and forth trying to avoid Korth. I tilted my head to the side, cheek resting on my hand. So Korth did occasionally have fun after all. Or at least valued Tess having fun enough to forget a portion of his dignity. No servants were around. Perhaps their absence was what gave him the courage to let his guard down. Was Tess the only one who ever saw this side of Korth? What would it take for me to extract the same from him? Our relationship would never develop into something deep and meaningful for him if we only ever spoke of superficial things. Tess's foot skidded on some loose gravel, and she fell. Immediately, Korth leapt to her side and eased her up as Tess searched her pocket and then scanned the ground. After a quick word, Korth helped her search for whatever had vacated her pocket during the fall. The last bits of sunset's light cast a hazy glow over the gardens as Korth picked up a tiny object, too small for me to determine what it was, and handed it back to Tess, who flung her arms around her brother. Still unaware that I'd been watching them, the two went back inside as Tess tucked whatever she was holding back into the safety of her pocket. Korth's question from his cheat sheet on my first day came back to me. He had asked about how many children I wanted. Korth would be an excellent father, just from the little bit I'd observed of him. I shook my head. There was no sense in thinking about having children with Korth when I knew what my future was once I was found out. The next morning, Korth took me to see his grandmother again. Fresh resolve flooding me, I walked confidently with Korth toward his Nona's room. I simply hadn't been confident enough the first time, that was all. "Good morning, Nona," I exclaimed brightly the moment the door was opened. "How are you today?" Nona's thin eyebrows furrowed so that her face became even more lined and wrinkled than before. "Do I know you?" "I'm Odette. I'm marrying your grandson, Korth." I sat on the stool at her side and placed my hand over her bony one, just as if she had been my own grandmother. Nona's eyes narrowed once more. Before she could express her disapproval of me once more, I asked quickly, "Can you tell me about your son, Orion? Korth has told me such wonderful things." On the opposite side of the bed, Korth gave me an encouraging nod. Nona's glare didn't soften. "I don't trust you," she said flatly. "Why are you asking about my son?" Because I care," I stammered, unsure of what I had done to give any indication that I was untrustworthy, besides the fact that I was. I shot a glance at Korth, who looked appalled at his grandmother's reaction. "Odette is wonderful, Nona," Korth said, coming forward and placing a hand on my shoulder. "If you get to know her—" "I don't want to get to know her," Nona grumped, becoming increasingly angry by the second. "I'm going to tell Orion about this. Where is he? Tell him to come here this instant. I want an investigation." Her voice rose in volume and aggression by the moment. I pulled back from her bedside as Godfrey bowed to Nona and poked his head out of the door to call for a page boy. My panic grew and I looked to Korth for help. Nona, he began in a placating tone.
Don't Nona me! Get this woman out of my room! Now!
Godfrey stepped toward me, but Korth blocked him. We were already leaving. Nona's shrieks continued as I left, fighting down the shaky feeling that was taking over my entire body. How could she know? Was it simply the ravings of an old woman, or would she be believed? What would the royal family say when the page boy brought word that the king's own mother didn't trust me? I'm so sorry, Korth apologized, looking incredibly embarrassed. She really is lovely most of the time. I hoped this time would be different. Perhaps. Godfrey spoke for the first time, and even his voice made me think of an old hound dog's yowl. Perhaps we should give some thought as to why His Majesty's mother feels the way she does, if this is a unique situation. I suggest you don't question my fiancé's integrity. Korth spoke quietly, but there was no mistaking the warning in his voice, and one look from him silenced his manservant. My breath came in short bursts as I scrambled to think of something to say. How could I defend myself and still ensure Korth's trust in me? The urgency of needing Korth to fall in love with me became all the more pressing. A drop of guilt mingled with my panic. It was a shame, really, that I had to convince an honest man to believe me instead of his own grandmother, when she was right. We still have time before my next meeting, Korth said as we reached the ground level. Allow me to make up for my grandmother's behavior. Would you like to accompany me on a stroll along the beach? I'd welcome it. Anything to get as far away from his Nona as possible, even if we had to have Godfrey with us. I resisted the impulse to shoot him a dirty look. The last thing I needed was someone else who suspected me. Instead, I slipped my hand into Korth's, who tensed for a fraction of a second before he hesitantly entwined his fingers around mine. I gave him an encouraging squeeze and swung our hands so Godfrey would be sure to notice. The beach wasn't far from the castle, and despite the fear that usually bubbled in my gut along with the somewhat fishy smell lingering in the air, I couldn't help the feelings of security that swept through me as we strolled up the coast, hand in hand. Korth walked with his ankles and calves in the water, pants rolled up to his knees, as the surf rolled in and covered our feet periodically before retreating in earnest again. Bits of seaweed occasionally washed up to catch on our toes or wrap around our ankles as we walked through the shallowest water. We stayed silent for a long time, simply soaking in the peace of the seashore. Seagulls screamed overhead, lamenting that we hadn't brought them anything to eat, and sandpipers scurried over the sand, their minuscule claws leaving the tiniest of scratches as they dashed in to gobble up tiny insects as the tide ebbed. As each new wave rushed forward, the sandpipers would dash away again, eager to avoid getting wet. Occasionally, gravel-like pebbles dug painfully into my feet, but for the majority of the time, I only felt soft silt beneath my toes. It had a rippled, convoluted pattern that matched the curves of my feet and was compacted enough that it was easy to walk in. I paused in our walk, letting the waves roll over my ankles, and Korth stared out at the horizon, far beyond the docks where his navy ships were moored. I followed his gaze, hungrily staring at the ships that could be the salvation of my people. How are things in Ibora? Korth asked. The rest of the sentence died before being voiced. Had my thoughts been written on my face? We are doing as well as can be expected. We lapsed into silence again. A pelican soared overhead and dove into the water, rising moments later with a fish clasped in its large beak. Korth sighed heavily. My attempts at romance are falling woefully short. What woeful wooing, you mean? I teased. How alliteratively delightful. What would you wish to discuss that would make you feel successful in wooing me? I gave his hand a gentle squeeze. I just don't know much about your values and opinions on things yet. Then ask me. Without the paper, I added with a slight wink. We turned to head back to the castle as Korth pondered, and this time, instead of splashing our way through the shallow surf, we strolled through the granulated sand that rose and fell in small mounds, soft enough that with each footstep we sank into the sand and left a trail everywhere we went. The sound of the wind whispering through the palm fronds on trees lining the beach was overpowered by the incessant rolling waves that chased each other toward land. I watched the waves, by how the crest of each wave boasted a foaming whitecap that rolled along the peak of each swell before it eventually lost height and faded from view as it slowed and returned to the ocean. Some of the white foam lasted much longer than others, propelled by the ocean's ebbing and flowing, yet all eventually lost momentum and disappeared. Were lies like that? Some lasted longer than others, depending on the circumstances and individuals involved. How long would my lies manage to stay afloat before the truth came out? How about I start? I suggested after Korth remained silent. If you were scared to do something, but doing it would benefit your people, would you still do it? Korth considered my question for several long moments before nodding, bobbing his head up and down in a way that reminded me of the fishing lures sailors used.
Of course. Bravery doesn't mean a lack of fear. It means facing your fear even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard.
He amended thoughtfully.
If my people needed to be protected, that is motivation strong enough to eclipse any fear.
I agree completely. Duty to their people should always come first for a ruler. See? We're already agreeing on so much more than bridges and dumbwaiters. Sand kicked up behind me, often sticking to my calves as I kept pace with Korth. My thoughts returned to Ibora's corrupt government, and I began chewing on my tongue. What should become of a leader who doesn't share such values?
They shouldn't be the ruler if they don't have the kingdom's best interests at heart.
Who would be in charge of removing them? The relentless wind tugged at my hair, blowing it in all directions at once. Gerda would have a job untangling it once we got back, and I didn't look forward to the painful unsnarling process.
If they recognize that they are no longer the best person for the job, they should step down, and ruling would default to the next in line for the throne.
What if they refuse to step down? A ruler who doesn't have the kingdom's best interests at heart wouldn't be eager to relinquish power so readily. Who would be in charge of dethroning them?
So many hypotheticals. Are you planning to dethrone me and my parents?
The corner of Korth's mouth twitched upward. There have been rumors of an uprising in Ibora is all, I said smoothly. I'm merely concerned for my father in my absence.
You would only have need to fear if he was unjust.
Not everyone agrees with what is just. You do what is best for your people, but I'm sure you still receive complaints.
Every day,
he sighed. And yet, even though it may upset others, you still do what you think is right.
Of course. Real leaders dare to speak the truth. If I lived in constant fear of upsetting others, I wouldn't have the strength to do what needs done.
What would you do if you found out that Berkway's king was corrupt and he refused to step down? Korth shook his head.
It isn't my business to get involved if it doesn't affect my people.
So you would allow their people to suffer?
We would offer sanctuary to them.
How could they get here if they were oppressed and unable to leave? Some of the frustration I felt seeped into my tone.
All of this is theoretical,
Korth protested.
There's no need to get worked up over something that isn't happening.
Just because we aren't aware doesn't mean it isn't happening, I said quietly. I don't want to reach the end of my life and discover that I was so afraid to stand up for justice that I apathetically stood by and let evil take over. But I let the matter drop. Clearly, Korth would never willingly be on the rebellion's side. If I wanted his help, it would have to be as Princess Odette.
We have just enough time for me to show you the swans and the cygnets on the lake,
Korth said as we got back.
The geese are there too, but I haven't seen any goslings yet.
I'm not overly fond of birds, I told him, thinking privately that I didn't want to give Odette any opportunity to call out to Korth. Korth let out a soft chuckle.
From a distance is probably for the best, but don't worry.
He patted my hand that was coiled around his elbow.
I'll handle it.
The tranquil lake lay nestled in the shadow of the castle, surface gleaming like a polished mirror and reflecting the azure sky. Vibrant foliage framed the water. A group of swans glided across the glassy surface, honking their distinctive calls to the air as a line of gray cygnets paddled after them, peeping along with the adults. Across the lake, I spotted Kurdy ordering Odette about. It was impossible to resist the smile that curved my lips upward as I watched her struggle to lug a heavy bucket of water over to the goose pen and slosh it over the rocks to clean it from the foul-smelling droppings. I squinted. Her tangled blonde hair was disheveled and tied back with a dull brown kerchief, and her servant's dress was even more patched and frayed than when I'd given it to her. As I watched, Odette's distant profile leaned against the pen, panting for breath as her shoulders sagged. Her words from before floated back to me.
"Servants are the lucky ones," she had said. "We keep all of you fed, clothed, and housed without charging a single copper for it. I don't understand why anyone would not want to have that life. What a glorious opportunity! To be taken from life on the streets to being raised at a royal palace."
Any guilt I may have entertained about my role in this charade vanished completely. This healthy dose of humility was just what Odette needed. How long had she stood by, applauding the injustices doled out to her people? She deserved everything she'd received. Kurdy paused in shoveling out one of the pens and shaded his eyes from the sun, turning toward me and Korth.
Isn't it wonderful?
Korth asked, oblivious to the servants working at the other end of the lake. His gaze was fixed on the swans and geese. The sun warmed my back as the rhythmic ripples caressed the shoreline with a soothing melody. I smiled and leaned my head against Korth's shoulder, watching Odette slip and fall into the mud. The bucket she had been carrying flew into the air and landed upside down on her head. Even from this distance, I could hear her whiny squeals in a perfect imitation of a squalling piglet. It's perfect.
Pardon me, your majesties.
Garrett grunted as he carried a sack of feed past us. As he crossed the path, his foot caught on a protruding root and he stumbled. The sack tumbled to the ground and split open, pouring the grain all over.
I'm sorry, so sorry.
Garrick apologized over and over as he hastily gathered up the grain, scooping it back into the sack.
Please forgive me.
Korth knelt to help him.
Don't worry, friend. It could happen to anyone. It was all my fault. I was up late last night and will be again tonight.
Lots of work? I asked sympathetically, bending down to assist him as well.
Just a moonlit stroll planned with some friends,
he said, throwing me a darkly significant look. Acting as though he was wiping sweat from his face, he touched first his ear, then his lips, and finally his forehead.
Midnight is the quietest time.
That sounds wonderful, I said, discreetly copying his action so that it appeared I was simply brushing hair out of my eyes.
My friends and I always have a lot to talk about.
Garrick gathered the sack back into his arms.
My apologies once again for the interruption.
Chapter 12. After feigning a headache and resting for several hours in the afternoon, I had no trouble staying up until it was time for the rebellion's midnight meeting. I'd kept the cabinet doors open all evening, watching to ensure that no one had raised or lowered the dumbwaiter. My guards still stood outside my doors. There was no way to leave there, and I didn't trust that a rope lowered from my window would go unnoticed for the duration of the meeting. It was just as well. Even if I could lower myself, I doubted my ability to climb back up a rope, let alone in a dress. It was time to see how well-designed this dumbwaiter really was. I padded over to the shaft and pulled at the rope, but it wouldn't budge. I studied it for a few minutes, then remembered Gerda snapping a lever before the dumbwaiter lowered. A red handle was located in the top right corner of the cabinet. I flipped it and immediately felt the tension in the rope change, nearly wrenching it from my hand. I redoubled my grip and pulled again. This time, the rope moved, and I continued pulling until, with a soft groan, the dumbwaiter was lifted to where it rested level with the cabinet's opening. After snapping the brake handle back into place, I clambered in and saw an identical handle inside. As I examined the ropes, trying to figure out how to operate it from the interior, I heard the brake lever release again, and the floor lurched unpleasantly as it descended. I didn't have the time to scramble out of the dumbwaiter. Cursing myself, I carefully braced myself against the side wall, praying that whoever held the rope at the bottom had steady hands as I remained trapped in a box suspended over nothingness. Who would have called for a dumbwaiter at midnight? And what could happen when they discovered me inside it? I cringed. What would everyone say when they discovered that their crown princess fiancé had climbed into a mechanism meant to transport food and laundry? Then, in a dark turn, I imagined what would happen if the person below lost their grip or simply released the rope without locking the brake into place. My stomach lurched again, and sweat beaded out on my palms. To distract myself, I studied the interior of the compartment. The red lever was near the top, with locking clamps opened around the rope sliding through the brake's open jaws. I dared not touch anything for fear it would cause the dumbwaiter to plummet 30 feet straight down and kill me, so I compromised by holding tight to the brake handle, waiting to pull it if whoever was moving the dumbwaiter failed to maneuver it safely. Thick ropes passed through holes in the floor and ceiling. I watched in fascination as they moved smoothly past my face and ran my fingers lightly along them, feeling the stiff, wayward fibers that poked out of the tightly braided cords. If there were as many pulleys as I suspected, I should very likely be able to maneuver myself up and down from inside the dumbwaiter. With a gentle thud, the dumbwaiter settled on the solid ground at the bottom of the shaft, and my anxiety abated with the feeling. Just for good measure, I pulled the lever. Just as I'd thought, it acted like a brake clamp and locked down on the rope so that it was impossible to move the dumbwaiter. I unclamped the brake and heard several other brakes far above me snap into place as well. Fascinating. They must be interconnected so that if one was set, they would all lock to ensure the compartment wouldn't move until the next person, at whichever level they were, was prepared to hoist it up or down again. A scraping sound came from directly in front of me, and I braced myself for whatever humiliation was in store for me. The panels opened, but no horrified maid squealed her surprise. Curdy was there, looking rather sullen and sulky. He didn't even bother to hold out his hand to help me clamber out. Not that I wanted him to.
"I've been waiting for you for ages,"
Curdy told me in hushed tones as I followed him down a long, dark hallway.
"I thought you'd pick this way. You and your fixation with dumbwaiters."
We said midnight. I'm on time. I looked around nervously for any sign of additional servants.
"No one else is here,"
Curdy said, still pouting, but lowered his voice to a stealthy whisper.
"I've been here long enough to know. You could have come down early to talk to me."
I matched his hushed volume. "First of all, I didn't even know you'd be here. Secondly, I thought you would be watching Odette."
"Garrick has her in the evenings. I had her all day and I'm due for a break."
"Any difficulties?"
"Mostly a lot of complaining about the wind tangling her hair, but she hasn't tried to run away or anything. She's too stupid to try."
"She isn't stupid," I contradicted. "Mean, entitled, and selfish, yes, but she isn't stupid. Don't underestimate her."
Sure,
Curdy grumbled, rolling his eyes.
"So how is it going with Prince Perfect? I saw you two today."
"It's going splendidly. he'll be head over heels in love with me by the time the first letter from my dear father, King Raquel, arrives. I smirked. Then he'll do anything to defend me.
Just as well. The sooner we can get this over with, the better.
Kurdy grouched. Don't like tending geese, do you?
I don't like tending Odette,
he corrected.
And I don't particularly care for seeing you looking all cozy with that pompous prince either.
I frowned. That's the entire reason we came here. You should be glad to see that it's working. As we approached the side door, I paused to allow Kurdy to open it, but he stopped just behind me.
What are you waiting for?
He snorted. Then his eyes widened as realization dawned.
You expect me to open doors for you now?
Furious with myself, I stretched my hand out, but Kurdy beat me to it.
No, allow me, your majesty. Clearly you expect royal treatment now. Who am I to deny you?
It's not like that, I said angrily.
You just got used to living in the lap of luxury? You'll never have to touch a door again. No wonder you go doe-eyed around your prince all the time. Who knew the price for your affection was a few open doors and hot meals?
Shut your mouth. I made no further attempt at conversation. A little gray cloud of doom hovered over Kurdy as we left the castle and made our way over to the grove of trees beside the lake. I knew he was waiting for me to say something to alleviate his moodiness, but I felt no need to do so. If he couldn't manage his own emotions, that was his business, not mine. I'd been very clear from the beginning that I wasn't interested in Kurdy as anything more than a fellow rebellion member plotting to overthrow a kingdom. There was no room for jealousy in this already dangerous mix. The moon's silvery reflection shimmered in the water, casting just enough light into the air that I could see several dark shapes moving among the trees. I hesitated, squinting to ensure that it was my fellow rebels and not some nocturnal animal with sharp teeth. Kurdy stopped too, staying a step behind me. Irritation tugged at me. If Korth had seen something shift in the shadows, I had no doubt he would immediately place himself between me and the threat. But Kurdy hung back. Are you sure it's safe? I asked. He shrugged.
I'm sure you'd be able to handle it if it wasn't.
His attitude dug under my skin, and I couldn't resist goading him a little. Korth would go first if there was even a question of it being unsafe.
And that is where I differ from him. I see women as equally capable. He clearly doesn't if he can't even trust them to take care of themselves.
The smug satisfaction in his voice dug the barbs of his condescension deeper. My jaw locked as I stalked toward the trees, glad to see that the dark shapes formed into the silhouettes of people I knew, but even gladder not to be alone with Kurdy's sulky gloom anymore.
Ah, Dahlia.
It was Thad, the large, heavy-set man who was one of my father's oldest friends.
Now we can begin.
The meeting proceeded, with each member giving reports on what they'd discovered about Haven Harbor's resources compared to Ibora's, the strength of the armada and how well-trained the soldiers were, and how the general population felt about Ibora and their prince's engagement to a foreign princess, which was favorable.
What about you?
Thad asked gruffly, nodding at me.
How are things with the prince?
As well as can be hoped, I reported. He doesn't seem to be a particularly physically affectionate person. From where he was leaning against a tree, Kurdy let out an exclamation of disgust, which I ignored. But we're making strides with our relationship. I believe that by the time he is asked to enter the dispute, he will be ready to defend me.
Good.
Thad nodded his approval.
Make sure to hold his attention well. Use your assets to your best advantage. Even if the prince isn't affectionate, he still has eyes.
Several guffaws rippled around the cluster of men, though Kurdy ground his teeth together and didn't join in.
If he's still standoffish, you can always get him alone for a bit. If there are enough rumors, he'll be forced to marry you even quicker.
Thad winked at me. An unusual defensiveness for Korth rose up within me. I don't need rumors. Korth will marry me without any of that.
But can you get him to agree to send aid by the time the letters come? Time is of the essence. It really doesn't matter if he marries you or not, as long as they send reinforcements.
I can do it, I stated, even louder than before. We don't want him to marry me because of rumors and be unwilling to send aid because he resents the manner in which we were married. Remember the end goal.
Yeah, it isn't like she's planning to live happily ever after here,
Kurdy growled.
Can you imagine?
Thad hooted.
As if anyone could ever be happily married to a stick-in-the-mud like that prince.
He hitched a prudish, stuffy expression onto his face and adopted a nasally, high-pitched voice.
According to the mandated rules.
The other men laughed, Kurdy hardest of all, and my stomach soured. Korth wasn't like that and didn't deserve to be slandered that way, even if he was a royal. Sure, he obeyed the rules, but it wasn't a bad thing to be an honorable man. At least he, unlike Raquel, tried to formulate rules that laid the groundwork for a productive, thriving society. While the other men continued to fling diatribe at Korth's straight-laced nature, Kurdy sidled up next to me with pursed lips and crossed arms.
You and that prince have been looking pretty cozy lately.
We're engaged. I'm supposed to cozy up to him, just like you're supposed to be watching Odette, I snipped. Then I raised my voice. Not to break up this old women's gossiping session, but I do need to get back before my guards notice I'm gone. Can we hear the rest of the reports? The knots in my stomach loosened a fractional amount as the men murmured agreement and stopped slandering Korth, turning instead to Edric, who had volunteered to help with Haven Harbor's docks and was giving an update on the status of the ship's supplies and military training he'd been observing.
Are you going to be that cozy with me when we get back?
Kurdy remained at my side, whispering to me instead of listening to the reports. I suppressed a sigh of frustration. Kurdy, I said as kindly as I could, I've told you I'm not interested in you that way. He instantly switched tactics.
Wow, really can't take a joke, can you? Are you becoming as stuffy and boring as that prince you're always throwing yourself at?
I shot him a withering look. Jealousy isn't becoming. Kurdy snatched my arm.
I joined this rebellion for you, Dahlia, and you're being just as dismissive to all of us as Odette and her father were to us before we left Ibora.
Edric had stopped speaking halfway through Kurdy's sentence, and his words echoed around the grove.
Get your hands off her,
Thad growled at Kurdy.
And don't accuse her when she's more at risk than anyone else. She's fulfilling her duties, and you ought to mind your place.
After a tight squeeze to my upper arm, Kurdy released me, a very ugly expression on his face. I matched his glare with one of my own, much more at ease now that I had some of the rebellion backing me up. Kurdy had no reason to be jealous. He and I never had anything between us beyond his idle flirting. Everyone here knew I was supposed to marry Korth for the good of the rebellion. Without me, we would have no chance of getting reinforcements and overthrowing Raquel.
What's her update then?
Kurdy spat.
What has she done other than fling herself at a prince too stupid to know or care who he's even marrying?
That's enough, I hissed, amid similarly disgruntled noises from my fellow rebels. I won't be spoken to like that, and I broke off the diatribe I longed to fling at Kurdy for insulting Korth. And I've gained the prince's trust. We'll have him signing the orders to send reinforcements within the week as soon as the first letter arrives. Murmurs and nods of approval met my words.
That should be any day now,
one of them murmured. Many of Haven Harbor's soldiers are already familiar with your faces now and believe you to be sent directly from the crown, I told them. Once we get word of Ibora's perilous condition, if you go back to aid the king and just happen to be the ones who meet the reinforcements when Haven Harbor sends them along, our story won't be questioned, and the attack can begin immediately. Wicked grins spread through the crowd, teeth gleaming in the candlelight. Everything is going as well as we could have hoped. Odette isn't causing any trouble, is she? I continued, turning to address Kurdy to show him that he was still an integral part of the rebellion. He shrugged indifferently. Just complaints about the smell and living conditions. Any word from Captain Renshaw about the soldiers he picked up? I turned to Simon, who had also stationed himself at the docks. Simon nodded. He picked them up and sent word that they were working on his crew. He told them that if they don't like his crew, he will sell them to his brother, another privateer. That's a very polite way of saying pirate, I laughed. We should have just killed them all, Kurdy grumbled, and my stomach convulsed. There were sacrifices that needed to be made for the rebellion to succeed. I knew that. But that didn't make it any more pleasant. Even if I hadn't been the one to force them off the plank, I was at least partially to blame for their fates, sold into slavery to a gang of pirates. Would my conscience ever be able to find peace? I shook my head. Once we did manage to overthrow the king, we would ensure that thousands of Ybor's citizens didn't suffer anymore. At least the citizens' suffering could be prevented. Surely the good of the many made up for the unfortunate fate of the soldiers loyal to Odette.
We'll meet up again in 4 days,
Thad announced.
We should have received the first letter by then, and Dahlia can update us at that time.
With a side glance at Kurdy, he went on.
I'll take her back.
Once again, we all moved in unison, touching our earlobes, lips, and foreheads. Hear all, speak none, remember always, we repeated together. In shadows we thrive, with unity we rise. The walk back to the dumbwaiter, free of Kurdy's oppressive presence, was fairly quiet. I remained lost in thought, trying to think of better ways to gain Korth's confidence.
Good luck,
Thad told me, looking up and down the corridor to ensure that no other servants were around. I climbed back into the dumbwaiter, and Thad inspected the ropes, trying to determine which to pull.
Your father would be proud of you. I'll speak with Garrick so he can keep an eye on Kurdy, but know that the rest of us think you're doing wonderfully, and you're the only one who can be in your position. I know it's a lot of pressure. We appreciate your sacrifice. I hope you know that.
Thank you, I told him, smiling in relief. I know I can't communicate much with the rest of you, but—
We understand,
he said quickly, then rolled his eyes and amended.
At least most of us do. Don't pay any mind to Kurdy. Which rope should I pull?
This one, I told him, indicating the correct one. There will be a small tag that says Odette on it when it's my stop. Thad's eyes fell, and I realized my error. He couldn't read. I'll set the brake when it comes to my room, I amended. You just pull. Once I was safely back in my room, I curled up on the bed and rekindled my hatred of Raquel and Odette. It was their fault that Ybor's citizens were poorly educated and hungry. Uneducated, hungry people were easy to control. As long as someone could dangle the promise of a full belly for their children, parents would sacrifice anything and obey any order to provide. Of course, Raquel and Odette would want them to be desperate and dependent. Korth was better than that. People here were much better educated, and I had yet to see a breadline like the one that wrapped around Ybor's castle each day. I tucked my arm under my head, staring out the open balcony that allowed a warm breeze into the room. If only we had a ruler like Korth, there would have been no need for treason and subterfuge. Chapter 13. As Korth and I strolled down the corridor toward the gardens, the sight of the page boy wending his way toward us, bearing a tray with a letter on it, sent me into a spiral of worry. Had it truly been 2 weeks already? Despite my assurances to the rebels, I lacked the confidence that Korth was prepared to pour a great deal of money and resources into a war he wasn't involved in. I kept my eyes fixed ahead as I took several deep breaths, willing my hand not to shake where I had my fingers interlaced with Korth's. The rebellion's success was resting on me. The innocent citizens of Ibora were counting on me. What was deceiving one prince in the grand scheme of things?
"A missive from Ibora, princess,"
the page boy said with a bow, holding out a tray with a thick envelope and letter opener on it. I gasped in excitement. It must be from my father. I gave Korth's hand a little squeeze before I took the letter and slit the envelope open. He said he would write and let me know when he could arrive for our... I allowed my voice to fade away for dramatic effect as my eyes slid from side to side, face falling by the moment.
"My dearest Odette, I hope this letter finds you safe and well in Haven Harbor. I write to you now with a heavy heart and news that I wish were otherwise. There has been an uprising in our kingdom, one that has shaken the very foundations of our realm. The rebels have seized control of the palace, and I find myself ousted from my rightful place as king. For now, I am in hiding, surrounded by loyal guards who remain dedicated to protecting me. But in truth, our situation is precarious at best, and I fear for what the future may hold. My dear daughter, it grieves me to inform you that it is not safe for you to return home at this time, even for visits. The rebels are ruthless in their quest for power, and they will stop at nothing to harm those associated with the royal family. Your safety, of course, is my utmost priority, and I implore you to remain where you are until further notice. I cannot predict how this political upheaval will affect your impending marriage to Prince Korth. Whether or not he still wishes to proceed with the union when our kingdom is in turmoil, I cannot tell. What I do know is that your well-being is paramount, and I will do everything in my power to ensure your safety, no matter the cost. If there is any possibility of aid from Haven Harbor, I would submit the humblest of pleas at this time. I enclosed an additional letter for you to give to Prince Korth. While I hate to request assistance even before your union is finalized, I would be lying if I claimed our situation here was anything but dire. Odette, know that you are always in my thoughts, and that I long for the day when we can be reunited once more. Until then, stay strong, stay safe, and know that you are loved beyond measure. With all my love, Papa." "What is it?"
Korth asked, touching a hand to my elbow. "I don't want to bother you with my family's troubles." As expected, Korth drew himself up.
"Your troubles are mine as well. What's wrong?"
The paper rustled as I carefully unfolded the pages and offered the first one to Korth. "There has been political unrest in our kingdom for some time, and it seems that... I let out a choked sob. "I just hope my father hasn't been..." I scrunched my eyes shut and didn't finish the sentence. My acting was to be commended. I maintained the princess-like composure that would be expected, but allowed my chin and voice to quiver enough that Korth was sure to take notice and feel compelled to heroically leap in to defend his fiancé. There was a long pause as Korth read the forged letter.
"It says there's another letter for me."
I glanced down, as if surprised to remember I still held an additional sheet. "Oh, I forgot." I held it out so we could both read it at the same time.
"Your Royal Highness, Prince Korth, I pen this letter with a heavy heart, yet with a glimmer of hope that you may heed my plea in this time of dire need. It is with great urgency that I reach out to you, seeking your aid in reclaiming what has unjustly been taken. As you may be aware, Ibora has fallen victim to a treacherous uprising, orchestrated by those who seek to usurp my rightful throne. The rebels have seized control of the palace, forcing me into hiding and plunging our land into chaos and uncertainty. The very foundation of our kingdom is under threat, and I fear that without swift and decisive action, it may be lost forever. Your Highness, I beseech you to lend your aid in retaking the castle and restoring order. Your military prowess and strategic insight are renowned far and wide, and your assistance in this matter would be invaluable. Together, we can stand against the rebellion before it has too much time to gain momentum. I understand that this is a considerable request, and it is one that I do not make lightly. However, the bond between Ibora and Haven Harbor extends from before the Siren Plague, and I trust that you will not turn a blind eye to the plight of a fellow ruler in need. Your support in this endeavor would not only safeguard the future of Ibora, but would also serve as a testament to the strength of our alliance. Your Highness, I implore you to consider my plea and act swiftly in the face of our adversary. With your aid, we may yet emerge victorious, and the light of justice may once again shine upon our kingdom. Lastly, I humbly request that even if aid cannot be sent, you keep my daughter safe until this matter is resolved. She is my most precious treasure, and her safety is of utmost importance to me. I trust in your kindness and goodwill to ensure her well-being, when I cannot provide that for her here, during these troubled times. With deepest regret and gratitude, King Raquel of Ibora.
I'll understand if you don't want to marry me, I told him in a slightly quavering voice. According to these, I nodded toward the letters. I'm not even a princess now. You have no obligation to me anymore. I hung my head. A strong finger hooked under my chin and brought my face up. The kindness and understanding radiating from his gaze would have warmed even the frostiest of hearts.
We'll figure it out. I'm not going to abandon you, and I still plan to marry you and love you unconditionally, even if your kingdom has some civil unrest. It could be that our marriage will help settle it. All is not lost.
The phrase, love you unconditionally, stuck out to me. There was no such thing. But even so, raw guilt plucked at my heartstrings. I knew I'd have to lie to Korth and manipulate him as part of this, but him being so gallant and chivalrous was making betraying him much more difficult. He ought not to be used. If only there was another way. But there wasn't. A watery smile lifted my lips. I'm fortunate that I can count on you to always be honorable. I wouldn't want to marry anyone else. I raised onto my tiptoes and tilted my head upward to invite him closer. Chaperone watching or not, I planned to kiss him so thoroughly that the poor boy would forget his own name and leap to do anything I asked. It would be impossible for him to resist. But after a quick glance down at my face, he swallowed hard and released me as if he'd been burned. His hasty step away left me feeling somewhat disappointed.
In regard to this missive,
Korth beat the second letter against his palm.
I will call for some emergency councils to address the concerns. Entering a foreign civil war before we're married would be unprecedented, but under the circumstances, I will need to send a correspondence to your father so we can assess the situation and formulate a plan.
But how long will that take? There are sure to be pirates in the vicinity. Wouldn't it be better to send military reinforcements now? If you send messengers to Ibora and they're intercepted, the rebels will just lie. There is no way to determine that any missive will be received by the correct party. My father's life is in danger right now, and if the rebels find him... I choked up. Korth sighed.
You're right. There isn't much time to delay. Is there a safe house or somewhere you can contact your father? Clearly he's still able to correspond with you, and he must have some guards protecting him from...
Something in his voice caught.
I'm glad you are here, and safe.
I am too. I feel protected around you. I stepped back in to lean gently against Korth. His arms wrapped automatically around me, and I slid my arms up his back, appreciating how muscular his chest was. An intrusive cough sounded from down the hallway, and I pulled back from Korth, annoyed. Chaperones. I'd never get Korth alone.
And I'm sorry.
Korth said quietly.
You spoke about the possibility of rebellions, and I dismissed it as hypothetical. I'll make sure to prepare a committee to examine this situation as soon as possible.
Thank you. I squeezed his hands. My father's life depends on how swiftly this is dealt with. I'm glad I can trust you to take care of it.
I'll update you as soon as I have confirmation,
Korth told me, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear.
Don't worry.